The mining colony of New Perth had been humanity's farthest outpost for 3 generations. Built on the rocky moon of Kepler 442c, it housed 12,000 souls who extracted rare earth elements from the ancient volcanic deposits beneath the surface. The colony existed in a delicate balance between progress and survival, where every breath of recycled air and drop of purified water represented another day of human persistence in the hostile void. Sarah Chun pressed her small face against the reinforced viewport of Habitat Block 7, watching the strange lights dance across the amber sky. At 8 years old, she had spent her entire life on this barren moon, but the auroras never failed to captivate her imagination. Her parents, both geological engineers, worked the deep shifts in the extraction tunnels, leaving Sarah in the care of the colony's automated systems and educational programs during the long lunar days. The lights grew brighter, more intense than usual. Sarah's breath fogged the viewport as she leaned closer, her dark eyes reflecting the swirling patterns above. Something was different about tonight's display. The auroras moved with purpose, forming geometric shapes that seemed almost deliberate. She had studied aurora formation in her science modules, but this defied everything she understood about charged particles and magnetic fields. A deep rumble shook the habitat block, causing Sarah to stumble backward from the viewport. The emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in harsh red illumination. Automated voices echoed through the corridors, speaking in calm, measured tones about seismic activity and standard safety protocols. But Sarah knew this wasn't a mining blast or geological shift. The rumble had come from above, not below. Through the viewport, she watched as massive shapes descended through the aurora-lit atmosphere. Ships, unlike anything in the colony's databases, moved with fluid grace despite their enormous size. They resembled living creatures more than manufactured vessels, their hulls rippling with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with some alien heartbeat. The lead ship was the size of a city block, its surface covered in what looked like breathing gills that opened and closed as it moved through the thin atmosphere. Sarah's wrist communicator crackled to life with her mother's voice, distorted by interference. "Sarah, honey, stay in the habitat. Don't go outside. Something's happening up there, and we're not sure what it is yet. The mining supervisors are calling it a first contact scenario." First contact. The word sent a thrill of excitement and terror through Sarah's young mind. She had dreamed of this moment, like every child raised on the frontier. But the reality felt heavier, more ominous than her fantasies. The ships continued their descent, landing in the vast mining fields that surrounded the colony. Each touchdown sent tremors through the moon's crust, triggering more automated safety announcements. The colony's main communication array went silent. Then, the power grid began fluctuating, causing lights throughout the habitat blocks to dim and brighten in irregular patterns. Sarah watched families hurrying through the corridors outside her quarters, carrying emergency supplies and heading toward the designated shelter areas. Some faces showed curiosity, others displayed the grim determination that came from living on the edge of human space. Her parents' mining team was trapped in Tunnel Complex Delta, according to the emergency broadcasts. A massive ship had landed directly above the tunnel entrance, sealing it with what appeared to be some kind of organic membrane. Rescue teams were organizing, but they had no way to communicate with the trapped miners or estimate how long their emergency life support would last. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of following protocol and reporting to the nearest shelter, she slipped out of her quarters and made her way toward the colony's outer airlocks. She had explored every maintenance tunnel and service corridor in the habitat during her lonely childhood, and she knew routes that most adults had forgotten. Her plan was simple and desperate: reach the emergency supply cache near the sealed tunnel and somehow signal for help. The outer surface of New Perth was a landscape of industrial brutality, softened by the ethereal glow of the alien ships. Sarah's environmental suit felt bulky and awkward as she made her way across the mining fields, following the marked paths between equipment depots and processing facilities. The alien vessels loomed overhead like sleeping giants, their bioluminescent patterns creating pools of shifting light across the barren terrain. As she approached Tunnel Complex Delta, Sarah could see the organic seal that blocked the entrance. It looked like living tissue, translucent and pulsing with internal fluids. Veins of darker material branched across its surface, and she could smell something sweet and metallic even through her suit's filtration system. The seal had grown into the tunnel mouth, as if it belonged there, as if it had always been part of the moon's landscape. Standing before the alien barrier, Sarah felt smaller than ever before. She pressed her gloved hands against the warm surface, hoping to find some weakness or opening. The material felt soft but impossibly strong, like muscle tissue covered in a protective membrane. As she searched for any way through, movement caught her eye. A figure approached from the shadow of the nearest alien ship. Tall and graceful, it moved with a fluid gait that seemed to flow rather than step. As it came closer, Sarah could make out details that her 8-year-old mind struggled to process. The being stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms that ended in delicate, multi-jointed hands. Its skin appeared to be living metal, shifting between silver and deep blue as light played across its surface. Most striking were its eyes, large, multifaceted structures that seemed to contain galaxies of swirling light. Sarah should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at her to flee back to the colony, to find adults, to hide. Instead, she stood frozen as the alien being approached. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. Small human, you seek the trapped ones below. The voice was neither male nor female, carrying harmonics that resonated through her thoughts like music. Your emotions burn bright with love and fear. We understand this pattern. Sarah found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. My parents are down there. Please, they need air to breathe. They'll die if someone doesn't help them. The alien being's head tilted in what might have been consideration. Its 4 hands moved in complex gestures, and Sarah felt a strange, tingling sensation as if the air around her had become charged with electricity. We came seeking resources, as your kind does. But we did not intend to trap your life-bearers. This creates ethical complexity in our mission parameters. I don't understand big words, Sarah said, tears beginning to fog her helmet's visor. I just want my mommy and daddy to be safe. The alien's multifaceted eyes seemed to focus more intently on her, and she felt a gentle presence touching the edges of her thoughts. It wasn't invasive or frightening, but rather like a warm hand resting on her shoulder. Your simple truth carries great weight, small human. We are called the Kethvar, and we have traveled far to harvest the deep minerals of this place. But perhaps some things are more valuable than resources. The being turned toward the sealed tunnel entrance and began a complex series of movements that resembled both dance and ritual. Its metallic skin began to glow with the same bioluminescent patterns that decorated their ships. The organic seal responded, its surface rippling and beginning to thin at its center. Slowly, a passage opened large enough for a human to pass through. The barrier will remain permeable for a short time, the Kethvar explained. Your trapped ones may emerge, but this creates risk for our own mission. We'll be questioned by our collective consciousness for this action. Sarah didn't fully understand the implications, but she knew an opportunity when she saw one. She activated her suit's emergency beacon, broadcasting the tunnel coordinates and the news that the passage was open. Within minutes, she could hear the whine of emergency vehicles racing across the mining fields toward their location. The first to emerge from the tunnel were the rescue team leaders, followed by a stream of exhausted but alive miners. Sarah scanned each face desperately until she spotted her parents among the survivors. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chun, stumbled forward and swept Sarah into her arms despite the bulky environmental suits that made the embrace awkward. Sarah, what are you doing here? How did you? Her mother's voice trailed off as she noticed the towering alien figure standing nearby. The Kethvar had remained motionless during the evacuation, its galaxy-filled eyes watching the human drama unfold with what might have been curiosity or compassion. Dr. Chun was a scientist first, and even in this emotional moment, her analytical mind engaged with the situation. She approached the alien being with careful steps, her suit's external speakers activated. Thank you for helping our people. I don't know why you did it, but thank you. The Kethvar's response formed in the minds of everyone present. The small one showed us something we had not considered. Your species protects its young ones with fierce determination, even when logic suggests retreat. This trait intrigues our collective consciousness. Other colonists were arriving now, including the colony's administrator and security teams. The situation was rapidly becoming complex, with first contact protocols being improvised on the spot. The Kethvar seemed to sense the growing tension and began to withdraw toward its ship. "Wait," Sarah called out, stepping forward despite her mother's restraining hand. "What happens now? Are you going to stay? Are we friends?" The alien being paused, its head turning back toward the small human who had somehow bridged two vastly different species with her simple act of love and courage. The small one asked questions that our collective consciousness must consider. "We came for minerals, but we have found something more complex. This encounter will require much deliberation among our kind." As the Kethvar moved away, its ship began to emit a low, musical tone that seemed to harmonize with the aurora patterns dancing overhead. One by one, the other alien vessels responded with their own harmonic contributions, creating a symphony that resonated through the moon's thin atmosphere and into the hearts of every human present. Dr. Chun knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. "What you did tonight was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous, Sarah. You save a lot of lives, including ours." Sarah watched the alien ships as they began to lift off from the mining fields, their bioluminescent patterns growing brighter as they ascended. "Mom, do you think they'll come back?" "I don't know, honey. But if they do, I hope it's as friends." The ships disappeared into the star-filled darkness beyond New Perth's atmosphere, leaving behind a colony forever changed. In the days that followed, the story of the little girl who spoke to aliens would spread throughout human space. Scientists would analyze every detail of the encounter, diplomats would debate its implications, and military strategists would assess potential threats and opportunities. But for Sarah Chun, the most important outcome was simpler. She had learned that sometimes the scariest moments could lead to the most amazing discoveries. And somewhere among the stars, a collective consciousness of beings called the Kethvar was having its first serious discussion about the nature of courage, family bonds, and the unexpected wisdom that could come from the youngest members of a species. The aurora patterns continued to dance across New Perth's amber sky, but now they seemed less alien and more like a bridge between worlds. Sarah pressed her face against her bedroom viewport, wondering what other wonders waited among the stars, and whether she would ever again meet the gentle giant who had listened to a child's simple request and chosen compassion over efficiency. In the deep space beyond the Kepler system, Kethvar ships carried the memory of that encounter back to their collective consciousness, along with detailed observations about human behavior under stress. The small humans' actions had introduced variables that their species had never encountered before, and those variables would require careful consideration before any future contact with humanity. The seed of something greater had been planted in that moment when an alien being chose to help rather than simply harvest. Neither species could imagine how that single act of kindness would eventually reshape the balance of power across the galaxy, or how the bonds formed between a scared little girl and an alien consciousness would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. 20 years had passed since the encounter on New Perth, and Sarah Chun had grown into Dr. Sarah Chun, one of humanity's leading xenobiologists and the foremost expert on Kethvar physiology and culture. Her childhood experience had shaped not just her career path, but humanity's entire approach to potential alien contact. The little girl who had fearlessly approached a 3-meter-tall alien had become the woman who spent her days preparing humanity for what many believed was inevitable: the return of the Kethvar. The Terran Research Institute on Luna had become the hub for all xenological studies following the New Perth incident. Sarah's office overlooked the ancient Mare Tranquillitatis, where humanity had taken its first steps beyond Earth. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now studied potential threats and opportunities that might come from even greater steps into the unknown. Dr. Chun reviewed the latest intelligence reports from deep space monitoring stations scattered throughout human territory. For the past 5 years, there had been increasing signs of Kethvar activity in remote systems. Ships matching their biomechanical signatures had been detected harvesting resources from uninhabited worlds, always staying just beyond human space. The pattern suggested careful observation rather than simple resource gathering. "Sarah, you need to see this," called Dr. Marcus Webb, her research partner and longtime friend. Marcus had been part of the original New Perth investigation team and had dedicated his career to understanding the implications of that first contact. He approached her desk, carrying a data pad with an expression that mixed excitement with deep concern. The data pad displayed a message that had arrived through the quantum communication array just hours earlier. It wasn't from any human colony or Earth government. The transmission signature matched Kethvar biotechnology, and the message was simple but profound. The small one who spoke with courage. We remember. The collective consciousness has reached consensus. Contact will be reestablished. Prepare your kind for discourse. Sarah felt her heart racing as she read the message multiple times, searching for nuance in the alien words that had been translated through the linguistic algorithms developed from her childhood encounter. Marcus, this is it. After 20 years, they're coming back. But why now? What's changed? Before Marcus could respond, emergency alerts began flashing across every screen in the research center. The Deep Space Monitoring Network had detected massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Not one ship, but dozens. The Kethvar weren't just returning. They were arriving in force. Admiral Patricia Voss materialized in the office via holographic projection, her expression grim with the weight of command. Dr. Chun, we need you at Fleet Command immediately. The aliens are back, and they're not alone. Our long-range sensors show an entire fleet, unlike anything we've ever seen. More importantly, they're not the only ones out there. Sarah and Marcus caught the next transport to the Terran Defense Force headquarters orbiting Earth. During the journey, Admiral Voss briefed them on the developing situation through encrypted channels. The Kethvar fleet numbered 47 vessels, ranging in size from city block destroyers to massive bioships that dwarfed human dreadnoughts. But more troubling were the other signatures detected alongside them. We're seeing evidence of at least 3 other alien species traveling with the Kethvar, Admiral Voss explained. Our xenological computers are calling them unknown contacts Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Each group has distinctly different technological signatures, suggesting this is some kind of alliance or coalition. The implications were staggering. Humanity had barely begun to understand one alien species, and now they faced the possibility of first contact with multiple civilizations simultaneously. Sarah found herself thinking back to that night on New Perth, remembering the gentle presence that had touched her thoughts, and the promise that their encounter would require much deliberation among our kind. Fleet Command was a maze of activity when they arrived. Officers and analysts moved between holographic displays showing real-time data from across the solar system. The alien fleet had taken position beyond the orbit of Pluto, maintaining a safe distance, but demonstrating their presence unmistakably. They made no aggressive moves, but their mere existence represented a shift in the balance of galactic power that humanity was still struggling to comprehend. Dr. Chun, thank God you're here, said General Harrison, the Defense Forces chief strategist. The aliens have been broadcasting a message repeatedly for the past 4 hours. It's in that same format we recorded during the New Perth incident, the kind that speaks directly to consciousness rather than through hearing. But it's specifically asking for the small human who showed compassion to the trapped ones. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. After 20 years, they remembered her by name and deed. What exactly is the message saying? General Harrison gestured toward a communication specialist who activated the alien broadcast. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of thoughts forming in her mind without passing through her ears, just as she remembered from childhood. But this voice was different, older, more complex, carrying harmonics that suggested multiple consciousness speaking in unison. Sarah Chun, who was small but is now grown, the collective consciousness has spent much time considering your actions and the nature of your species. We return not alone, for we have shared your memory with others among the star paths. 3 other collectives wish to observe this discourse. We propose meeting in the neutral space between worlds where no species claims dominance. The message continued, explaining that the Kethvar had spent 2 decades studying humanity from a distance, monitoring human expansion and behavior across dozens of colonies. They had shared their observations with other spacefaring civilizations, and the consensus was that humanity represented something unique and potentially valuable in galactic civilization. They're treating us like a case study, Marcus observed. 20 years of watching how we develop, how we expand, how we treat each other and our environment. Admiral Voss nodded grimly. The question is whether we passed their tests or failed them. Are they here to welcome us into galactic society, or to decide our fate? Sarah studied the tactical displays showing the alien fleet positions. The formation suggested neither aggressive intent nor defensive posture, but rather something resembling a diplomatic arrangement. I think they're here because of what happened on New Perth. One act of kindness somehow convinced them that humanity might be worth knowing. Over the next several hours, diplomatic protocols were hastily developed for the most significant moment in human history. Sarah would lead the human delegation, along with representatives from Earth's government, the Colonial Alliance, and the Terran Defense Force. They would meet aboard a neutral station that the aliens would construct at the midpoint between their fleet and human space. The construction process itself was a wonder to observe. Kethvar bioships extended organic tendrils that began growing and shaping themselves into a complex structure in the vacuum of space. Other alien vessels contributed their own technologies, creating a station that represented a fusion of 4 different approaches to space engineering. The result was both beautiful and functional, a crystalline structure surrounded by flowing organic elements and geometric patterns that shifted and changed as if the station were alive. Sarah's delegation traveled to the meeting point aboard the UTS Harmony, humanity's most advanced diplomatic vessel. As they approached the alien station, she couldn't help but think about how much had changed since that night when a scared 8-year-old girl had asked an alien for help saving her parents. The docking process was seamless, with the station extending what appeared to be living airlocks that sealed perfectly with their ship. As Sarah stepped into the station's interior, she was struck by the way different architectural styles blended together. Sections that were clearly Kethvar biotechnology flowed into areas that resembled crystalline caves, which then transitioned into spaces that defied easy description with their impossible geometries. 4 distinct groups awaited them in a vast central chamber that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. The Kethvar delegation was led by a being that Sarah somehow recognized, despite the fact that all Kethvar looked remarkably similar to human eyes. This one carried the same gentle presence that she remembered from New Perth, and, when it spoke, her mind filled with familiar harmonics. Sarah Chun, the collective consciousness is pleased to observe your growth from small courage to great understanding. We are the Kethvar, but our companions require introduction. The other 3 species were unlike anything in human imagination. The delegation labeled Unknown Contact Alpha consisted of beings that appear to be made entirely of living crystal, their forms constantly shifting between geometric shapes. They communicated through patterns of light that played across their surfaces, and their thoughts reached human minds as mathematical concepts rather than words. Unknown Contact Beta challenged human understanding of biology itself. They existed as clouds of interconnected particles that maintained coherent consciousness while constantly changing physical form. Their communication felt like gentle pressure against human thoughts, conveying concepts through emotional impressions rather than language. The most disturbing were the beings designated Unknown Contact Gamma. They wore environmental suits that obscured their true forms, but their presence felt heavy and ancient. When they communicated, their thoughts carried an undertone of vast intelligence tempered by what might have been sadness or resignation. We are the conclave of 4. The Kethvar representative explained. Each of our species has achieved travel among the stars, and each has encountered the choice that faces all intelligent life, whether to seek only resources and territory or to seek understanding and alliance with others. Your species approaches this same crossroads. Sarah found her voice, drawing on 2 decades of preparation and study. We're honored by your attention and your willingness to meet with us. But I have to ask, why us? Why humanity? The crystal beings responded with cascading patterns of light that translated as mathematical joy. Your species demonstrated altruism toward the unknown. The small human sought to preserve life rather than retreat from unfamiliarity. This behavior pattern occurs rarely in our observations of developing civilizations. The particle cloud added its emotional impressions, conveying concepts of surprise and hope. Most species, it seemed, responded to first contact with fear or aggression. Humanity's response had been unique, a child asking for help rather than running away, followed by a species-wide effort to understand and prepare for further contact rather than militarizing against the unknown. The suited beings from unknown contact Gamma remained silent until directly addressed by Sarah. What do you think about our species? What have your observations shown you? Their response carried weight and sadness. We have seen many species reach the star paths. Most follow patterns of conquest or isolation. Some achieve harmony within their own kind, but remain closed to others. You show potential for a different path, but potential is fragile. We have seen such promise broken by fear and misunderstanding. The meeting continued for hours, with each species sharing observations about humanity's expansion into space. They had watched human colonies develop, had observed how humanity dealt with resource scarcity, territorial disputes, and environmental challenges. They had seen both humanity's capacity for cooperation and its tendency toward conflict. The question before us, the HFY representative continued, is whether your species is ready for membership in the greater community of star-traveling civilizations. This requires more than technology. It requires wisdom, restraint, and the ability to seek mutual benefit rather than dominance. Admiral Voss leaned forward. What exactly does membership entail? Are you talking about some kind of galactic government? The crystal beings pulsed with what translated as gentle amusement. Not government. Cooperation. Shared knowledge. Protection against threats that no single species can face alone. But also responsibility. Member species must prove they will not use shared knowledge to harm others or themselves. Sarah began to understand the magnitude of what was being offered. This wasn't just first contact. It was an invitation to join a galactic community that spanned multiple star systems and civilizations. But it was also a test, one that humanity might fail if they approached it with the wrong intentions. What kind of threats? She asked. The suited beings from unknown contact Gamma responded with a communication that chilled every human present. They conveyed images of species that had achieved star travel, but used it for conquest rather than exploration. Entire civilizations reduced to slavery or extinction by aggressive expansion. Worlds stripped bare by resource harvesting that left no thought for those who came after. The conclave exists partially to contain such threats, the HFY explained. But containment requires strength, and strength requires unity among those who choose cooperation over domination. The implications were clear. Humanity was being offered a choice between isolation and integration, between going it alone in a hostile galaxy, or joining a community that offered protection and advancement in exchange for responsibility and restraint. General Harrison asked the question that everyone was thinking. How do we prove we're worthy of membership? What's the test? The answer came from all four species simultaneously, their different forms of communication blending into a unified response that resonated through the minds of every human present. The test would not be imposed by the conclave. Instead, it would come from within humanity itself. How they chose to proceed after this meeting would determine their fate. The conclave would withdraw to observe from a distance. Humanity would be given access to basic technologies that would accelerate their development, but also the freedom to use those technologies as they saw fit. If humanity used the gifts wisely, if they expanded into space without destroying what they found there, if they encountered other species with the same spirit of cooperation that Sarah had shown on New Perth, then the conclave would return with an offer of full membership. But if humanity used the technologies for conquest or destruction, if they repeated the mistakes of aggressive species that the conclave had been forced to contain, then they would face a very different kind of return visit. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt the weight of her species' future settling on her shoulders. The scared little girl who had asked an alien for help had somehow become the bridge between humanity and its destiny among the stars. The choice that lay ahead would determine whether that destiny would be one of cooperation and growth, or one of conflict and containment. The HFY representative approached her as the delegations prepared to separate. The collective consciousness wishes you to know. Your courage as a small one has created possibilities for your entire species. But courage alone will not determine the outcome. Your people must choose wisely. As Sarah returned to the UTS Harmony, she looked back at the alien station one final time. In the distance, the massive fleet waited with patience that spoke of civilizations that thought in terms of centuries rather than years. Humanity had been given a gift and a test, and Everything that happened next would determine whether they would join the community of stars or stand alone against the darkness. The technologies gifted by the Conclave arrived 3 months after the historic meeting, delivered by automated HFY bioships that landed at major human research facilities across known space. The packages themselves were marvels of engineering. Crystalline data cores that interfaced directly with human computer systems, sharing knowledge and formats that seemed to anticipate exactly how human minds would process complex information. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the main laboratory of the Terran Research Institute, watching teams of scientists and engineers work frantically to understand the implications of what they had received. The data cores contained blueprints for technologies that would advance human civilization by centuries in the span of years. Faster-than-light communication systems that could link human colonies instantaneously. Energy production methods that could power entire worlds without environmental destruction. Medical technologies that could extend human lifespan and eliminate most genetic diseases. But, perhaps most significantly, they had received the fundamental principles behind gravity manipulation technology. Not just the theoretical framework, but practical applications that would allow humanity to build ships capable of traveling between star systems in weeks rather than years. The implications for human expansion were staggering. "Sarah, you need to see this," called Dr. Marcus Webb from across the laboratory. He was standing before a holographic display that showed the current distribution of human colonies throughout known space. Red dots marked the 47 established settlements, connected by shipping routes that represented months or years of travel time. If we can implement even half of these technologies, we could reach the Andromeda arm within a generation. Sarah studied the display with mixed feelings. The little girl in her was thrilled by the possibilities, but the xenobiologist understood the dangers. "Marcus, that's exactly what we need to be careful about. The Conclave is watching to see if we'll use these gifts responsibly or if we'll become another expansionist species that they need to contain." The political implications of the Conclave's gifts had created chaos throughout human space. Earth's government wanted to classify the technologies and control their distribution, arguing that unrestricted access could lead to conflicts between human colonies. The Colonial Alliance pushed for immediate development and deployment, claiming that humanity needed to establish a stronger presence in space before other species decided to challenge them. Independent colonies demanded their fair share of the technologies, fearing that Earth and the major powers would hoard the advantages for themselves. Admiral Voss had requested Sarah's input on the military applications of the new technologies. The gravity manipulation systems could revolutionize space combat, but they could also be used to create defensive shields that would make warfare nearly obsolete. The choice of how to implement them would send a clear signal to the Conclave about humanity's intentions. "We're at a crossroads," Sarah explained to the emergency session of the Colonial Defense Council. Representatives from 47 worlds listened via quantum communication links as she presented her analysis. "Every decision we make from this point forward will be evaluated by beings who think in terms of centuries and who have the power to either welcome us into galactic civilization or treat us as a threat to be contained." Governor Martinez of New Terra raised the concern that many colonists shared. "Dr. Chun, with respect, we can't make decisions based on fear of alien judgment. These technologies could solve resource conflicts, eliminate energy poverty, and secure humanity's future among the stars. The question is whether we're brave enough to use them." "The question," Sarah replied firmly, "is whether we're wise enough to use them correctly. The Conclave has made it clear that they've seen species with similar potential fail this test. We need to prove that we can expand and advance without becoming destructive or aggressive." The debate continued for weeks, played out across human space through news networks, colonial assemblies, and research committees. Dr. Chun found herself at the center of every discussion. The woman who had spoken to aliens as a child and now bore the responsibility of guiding humanity's response to their gifts. The first test came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected unknown ships approaching the frontier colony of Haven's Rest. The vessels didn't match any known human design, nor did they resemble the biomechanical signatures of the Kethvar or their Conclave partners. These ships were angular and aggressive-looking, with weapons signatures that suggested hostile intent. Haven's Rest sent out desperate communications as the alien ships entered the system. The colonists reported that the vessels were demanding the location of human homeworlds and information about human military capabilities. When the colony administrator refused to provide the information, the alien ships began powering weapon systems. The emergency reached Sarah's desk within hours. Dr. Chun, we have a first contact situation that's gone bad, Admiral Voss explained via secure channel. These aren't conclave species. Our computers are calling them unknown contact Delta, and they're not here for friendly conversation. They've given Haven's Rest 12 hours to provide detailed intelligence about human space or face attack. Sarah felt her heart sink. The test had arrived, and it was exactly the kind of scenario that could determine humanity's fate. How they responded to this threat would show the Conclave whether humans could handle the responsibilities that came with advanced technology. What's our military response capability? She asked. We have 3 destroyers in the area, but they're outgunned and outnumbered. The new gravity manipulation technologies could give us an advantage, but implementing them would mean weaponizing the Conclave's gifts before we've proven we can use them responsibly. The dilemma was perfect in its cruelty. Use the technologies for military purposes and risk being classified as an aggressive species, or allow human colonists to suffer and potentially die to maintain moral standing with the Conclave. Sarah made a decision that would echo through human history. Admiral, prepare our ships with the defensive applications of the gravity manipulation technology. We protect our people, but we don't attack unless attacked first. And I want to try something else. Within 6 hours, Sarah was aboard the UTS Harmony again, racing toward Haven's Rest with a small diplomatic team. Her plan was desperate, but simple. Attempt direct contact with the aggressive aliens, just as she had approached the Kethvar 20 years earlier. If these beings could be reasoned with, it would demonstrate humanity's commitment to peaceful solutions. If they couldn't, at least humanity would have tried diplomacy before resorting to force. The journey to Haven's Rest took 36 hours using conventional faster-than-light drives. During the trip, Sarah studied everything human intelligence had gathered about unknown contact Delta. The ships were clearly warlike, with heavy armor and multiple weapon systems. Their communication attempts had been demands rather than requests, and their technological signatures suggested a species that had achieved interstellar travel through conquest rather than cooperation. When the Harmony arrived at Haven's Rest, they found a tense standoff. The alien ships had taken position around the colony, blocking all escape routes. Haven's Rest itself was powered down to minimal systems, trying to present as non-threatening a profile as possible while still maintaining life support for its 12,000 inhabitants. Unknown vessels. This is Dr. Sarah Chun of the Terran Research Institute. She broadcast on all frequencies. We request permission to communicate directly with your commanders. We believe this situation can be resolved without conflict. The response was immediate and chilling. Human vessel, you will provide all information about your species' military capabilities and the location of your home systems, where the colony will be destroyed to demonstrate our resolve. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. This species clearly operated on principles of dominance and intimidation, exactly the opposite of the cooperation that the Conclave valued. We are willing to share basic information about our peaceful intentions, but we cannot provide military intelligence that could be used to harm innocent people. You mistake our request for negotiation. Comply or watch your colonists die. The alien ships began moving into attack formation. Sarah knew that she had seconds to find a solution before the situation escalated beyond any hope of peaceful resolution. She made a choice that went against every diplomatic protocol in the book. Computer, open a channel to the Conclave monitoring station that we know is observing this system. Her communications officer looked shocked. Dr. Chun, we have no confirmed presence of Conclave ships in this area. Trust me on this. Open the channel and broadcast on the same frequencies the Kethvar use for their consciousness-to-consciousness communication. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to recreate the mental state she had experienced during her encounters with the Kethvar. She thought about the moment on New Perth when she had asked for help saving her parents, and the more recent meeting where the Conclave had explained their test for humanity. Kethvar collective consciousness. I know you're monitoring this situation. We're facing beings who demand information through threats of violence. We won't give them what they want because it would endanger innocent people throughout human space. But we also won't attack them unless they force us to defend ourselves. This is our answer to your test. For long moments, nothing happened. The alien ships continued their approach toward Haven's Rest, weapons charging to full power. Then space itself seemed to shimmer, and 3 Kethvar bioships materialized from what must have been sophisticated cloaking technology. The effect on unknown contact delta was immediate. Their aggressive formation broke apart as they detected the conclave vessels. Frantic communications began passing between the alien ships, clearly recognizing the Kethvar signatures and understanding their significance. The familiar voice of the Kethvar collective consciousness reached Sarah's mind. "Sarah Chun, your response demonstrates the wisdom we had hoped to observe. These beings call themselves the hegemony of Zar, and they're known to us. They expand through conquest and intimidation, taking what they desire from species too weak to resist." One of the Kethvar ships moved between the hegemony vessels and Haven's Rest. "Hegemony of Zar, you are in violation of conclave territorial agreements. This species is under observation for potential membership. Withdraw immediately or face consequences." The hegemony commander's response was filled with anger and frustration. "Kethvar, this species possesses no claim to conclave protection. They are unaffiliated primitives. Their status is under review. Your aggressive actions toward them constitute interference with conclave business. Withdraw now." Sarah watched in amazement as the superior force of hegemony warships began powering down their weapons and preparing to leave the system. The presence of just 3 Kethvar vessels had completely changed the dynamic of the confrontation. It was a clear demonstration of the protection that came with conclave membership, but also a reminder of the power that these civilizations wielded. As the hegemony ships departed, the Kethvar collective consciousness spoke to Sarah once more. "Your response to this threat has been observed and evaluated. You chose protection over aggression, and you sought communication rather than immediate violence. These actions speak well for your species' potential. What about Haven's Rest? Are they safe now?" The hegemony will not return to this system. However, they will likely probe other human colonies, seeking easier targets and testing your response patterns. How your species handles future encounters will continue to inform our evaluation. The implications were clear. This had been one test among many that humanity would face. The hegemony represented the kind of aggressive species that made the conclave necessary, and how humanity dealt with such threats would determine whether they were seen as potential allies or potential problems. Over the following months, hegemony ships appeared at 6 more human colonies, each time making the same demands for military intelligence and territorial information. Each time, human responses followed the pattern established at Haven's Rest. Defensive technologies were deployed to protect colonists, but no offensive actions were taken unless absolutely necessary. Diplomatic contact was always attempted first, and conclave monitoring was explicitly acknowledged. The strategy worked. In 4 cases, the hegemony withdrew when faced with unexpected defensive capabilities. In 2 instances, they attempted attacks, but found human shields powered by gravity manipulation technology to be impenetrable. No human colonies were lost, and no hegemony ships were destroyed unnecessarily. But the encounters revealed something troubling about the galactic political situation. The hegemony was not the only aggressive species in the galaxy. Intelligence gathered during the confrontations indicated at least 7 other civilizations that expanded through conquest rather than cooperation. The Conclave represented an alliance of peaceful species in a galaxy that contained significant threats. Dr. Chun presented her analysis to the Colonial Defense Council 6 months after the first hegemony contact. "We're not just being tested for membership in a peaceful organization," she explained. "We're being evaluated as potential allies in an ongoing conflict between cooperative and aggressive civilizations. The Conclave needs members who can defend themselves and others, not just species who avoid conflict." The revelation changed everything. Humanity's expansion into space wasn't just about exploration and resource gathering anymore. They were positioning themselves in a galactic community where their choices would affect the balance between cooperation and conquest among the stars. Admiral Voss summarized the situation perfectly. "We're not just trying to prove we're peaceful. We're trying to prove we're peaceful but not weak. The Conclave needs allies who will fight to protect cooperation and freedom, not pacifists who will stand aside while aggressive species destroy others." Sarah nodded, thinking back to that night on New Perth when a small act of courage had somehow set these vast events in motion. The child who asked for help saving her parents has become a species asked to help save galactic civilization. The question is whether we're brave enough and wise enough to accept that responsibility. The hegemony war, as historians would later call it, was about to begin. But thanks to a little girl's courage 20 years earlier, humanity would not face it alone. The message that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning, transmitted through quantum channels that bypassed normal communication networks entirely. Sarah Chun was in her laboratory analyzing the latest hegemony ship configurations when her personal communicator activated with the distinctive harmonic patterns that indicated HFY origin. Dr. Sarah Chun, the collective consciousness requests immediate consultation. The situation has evolved beyond our initial parameters. The hegemony is allied with 6 other aggressive species and begun coordinated attacks against Conclave member worlds. Your species' formal evaluation period is concluded. The time for decision has arrived. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. After 18 months of careful testing and gradual integration, humanity was being asked to make the choice that would define their place in galactic civilization. The test period was over, and the real war was beginning. Within hours, she was aboard the UTS Harmony once again, traveling to a rendezvous point deep in space where the full Conclave fleet had assembled. But this time, she wasn't alone. Admiral Voss commanded a squadron of 12 human vessels equipped with the latest gravity manipulation technology, representing humanity's contribution to the defense of cooperative civilization. The sight that greeted them at the rendezvous point defied comprehension. Nearly 300 ships filled the space around a massive biomechanical station that seemed to grow and adapt even as they watched. HFY vessels flowed like living things through formations of crystalline ships that refracted starlight into rainbow patterns. Particle clouds that were somehow ships maneuvered alongside geometric constructs that challenged human understanding of physics. But what struck Sarah most powerfully was the presence of other species that she had never seen before. The Conclave was larger than she had realized, encompassing dozens of civilizations that had chosen cooperation over conquest. Some were recognizable as biological life forms. Others seemed to exist as pure energy or exotic matter. Yet all were united in their commitment to defending the principle that intelligence should seek understanding rather than domination. The HFY representative who greeted Sarah's delegation was the same consciousness she had first encountered on New Perth, now serving as the collective's primary liaison with humanity. Sarah Chun, the small human who demonstrated courage, has become the bridge between civilizations. Your species' actions during the evaluation period have impressed the Conclave greatly. What exactly have we proven? Sarah asked, still awed by the scale of the assembled fleet around them. That humanity possesses the rarest combination of traits we seek in allies. The wisdom to prefer peace, but the courage to fight when necessary. The strength to defend others, but the restraint to avoid unnecessary violence. And the ability to grow rapidly while maintaining ethical principles. Admiral Voss stepped forward. We're honored by your confidence, but we need to understand what we're committing to. What exactly is the scope of this conflict? The answer came not just from the HFY, but from representatives of a dozen other species speaking in their various forms of consciousness-to-consciousness communication. The hegemony of Tsar had convinced 6 other aggressive civilizations to form what they called the Dominion Alliance. Together, they commanded nearly 1,000 warships and had begun systematic attacks on the outer worlds of Conclave space. Their strategy was elegant in its brutality. Rather than attacking heavily defended core worlds, they targeted colonies and research stations that couldn't adequately defend themselves. Each successful raid provided resources for their war effort while demonstrating that the Conclave couldn't protect its own members. The psychological warfare was as important as the physical destruction. 3 Conclave member species have already withdrawn from our alliance, explained one of the crystal beings through cascading light patterns. They fear that continued membership makes them targets for Dominion aggression. If this pattern continues, the Conclave will fragment, leaving individual species vulnerable to conquest. Sarah began to understand the true magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just a war between different philosophies of expansion. It was a battle for the future structure of galactic civilization. If the aggressive species proved that cooperation led to vulnerability, more civilizations would adopt conquest-based expansion as a survival strategy. What role does humanity play in your strategic planning? Admiral Voss asked. The Kethvar response revealed the extent to which humanity's evaluation period had been observed and analyzed. Human tactical innovations during the hegemony encounters had impressed Conclave military analysts. The way human ships used gravity manipulation technology for both defensive and offensive purposes represented thinking that none of the Conclave species had developed independently. More importantly, humanity's rapid adaptation to new technologies and situations suggested they could serve as a bridge between Conclave species with very different capabilities. Human crews could coordinate fleets containing crystalline ships that communicated through light patterns, particle cloud vessels that moved through emotional impressions, and biomechanical craft that responded to collective consciousness. We propose a joint operation, the Kethvar explained. Dominion forces have captured the Lyrian system, which contains research stations belonging to 3 different Conclave species. The captive scientists possess knowledge that the Dominion could use to accelerate their own technological development. A rescue mission would save valuable lives and prevent dangerous information from falling into aggressive hands. Sarah studied the tactical displays that materialized around them, showing the Lyrian system's current situation. 7 Dominion ships guarded the captured research stations, while the scientists and their families were being held as both hostages and potential sources of information. A direct assault would likely result in the execution of the captives, but leaving them in Dominion hands was equally unacceptable. "What kind of mission profile are you considering?" she asked. The answer revealed the level of trust that humanity had earned during their evaluation period. The Conclave was proposing a joint operation where human ships would lead a mixed fleet of Conclave vessels in a coordinated rescue mission. Human tactical flexibility would be combined with the unique capabilities of other species to achieve objectives that no single civilization could accomplish alone. But the mission would also serve as humanity's formal initiation into Conclave membership. Success would demonstrate that humans could work effectively with alien allies to protect cooperative principles. Failure would suggest that humanity wasn't ready for the responsibilities that came with advanced galactic civilization. Admiral Voss accepted the challenge without hesitation. Admiral Patricia Voss, representing the Terran Defense Force and the Colonial Alliance, formally accepts this mission on behalf of humanity. We'll show the Dominion what happens when species choose to work together instead of fighting alone. The preparation process took 72 hours and represented the most intensive cross-species cooperation in galactic history. Human engineers worked alongside crystalline technicians to integrate different weapon systems. Kethvar biomechanics merged with human computer systems to create hybrid command interfaces. Particle cloud navigators provided stellar positioning data that enhanced human tactical computers. Sarah found herself serving as more than just a diplomat. Her unique experience with alien consciousness communication made her the ideal coordinator for the multi-species command structure. She could translate concepts between human tactical thinking and alien strategic approaches, ensuring that all fleet elements understood their roles in the complex operation. The fleet that emerged from this collaboration was unlike anything that had ever existed. 60 ships from 12 different species, each contributing unique capabilities to a unified command structure. Human destroyers led formations of crystalline light cruisers. Kethvar bioships provided cover for particle cloud stealth vessels. Energy beings guided geometric constructs that defied traditional physics. The approach to the Lyrian system required precise coordination across multiple levels of space-time that human science was only beginning to understand. Some Conclave ships could travel through dimensions that bypassed normal space entirely, while others moved by manipulating probability field around star systems. The human ships, with their gravity manipulation drives, serve as anchor points that allowed the exotic vessel types to maintain formation during complex maneuvers. Sarah monitored the operation from the bridge of the UTS Harmony, which had been designated as the command vessel for the Joint Fleet. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, not just for the success of the mission, but for humanity's entire future among the stars. If this operation failed, the Conclave might decide that humans weren't ready for full membership. If it succeeded, humanity would take its place as a founding member of the greatest alliance in galactic history. The Dominion ships guarding the Lyrian system were powerful and well-armed, but they had never faced a coordinated attack from multiple species with completely different technological approaches. Crystalline vessels opened the engagement by overwhelming Dominion sensors with complex light patterns that created false target readings. Particle cloud ships penetrated their defensive screens by existing partially outside normal space. Energy beings disrupted their power systems through methods that Dominion technology couldn't counter or even detect. Human ships provided the tactical backbone that allowed these exotic capabilities to be used effectively. Admiral Voss coordinated the battle from the Harmony, translating alien tactical concepts into practical maneuvers that achieved specific objectives. Human crews served aboard many of the alien vessels, providing the rapid decision-making and adaptability that complemented the more specialized abilities of other species. The rescue operation itself required even more precise coordination. Research stations contained delicate equipment and vulnerable captives that couldn't survive traditional combat operations. Human boarding teams led mixed groups of Conclave specialists in simultaneous assaults on 7 different facilities, each requiring different approaches based on the alien technologies involved. Sarah accompanied the team assaulting the primary research station, where the most sensitive information was believed to be stored. The facility contained scientists from 3 different Conclave species, each requiring different environmental conditions for survival. The rescue had to extract all captives while preventing the Dominion forces from destroying research data that could accelerate their military development. The boarding operation brought Sarah face-to-face with the hegemony of Tsar for the first time. The species that had threatened Haven's rest 18 months earlier proved to be even more aggressive and militaristic than human intelligence had suggested. They showed no concern for civilian casualties and were prepared to execute all captives rather than allow them to be rescued. But they hadn't anticipated the level of coordination that the joint Conclave forces could achieve. While human Marines engaged hegemony soldiers in conventional combat, Crystalline specialists used light-based technology to disable security systems. Particle cloud beings extracted captives through sections of the station that existed partially outside normal space. Energy creatures disrupted hegemony weapons by existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The operation succeeded beyond all expectations. All captives were rescued alive, critical research data was secured, and the Dominion ships were either destroyed or forced to retreat. But, more importantly, the mission demonstrated that cooperation between different species could achieve results that no single civilization could accomplish through individual effort. As the joint fleet returned to Conclave space with the rescued scientists, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The scared little girl who had asked an alien for help 28 years earlier had somehow become the coordinator for an operation that proved humanity deserved its place among the stars. The Kethvar collective consciousness reached out to her as they approached the rendezvous point where the main Conclave fleet waited. Sarah Chun, the demonstration is complete. Humanity has proven its worthiness for full membership in our alliance. But, more than that, you have shown how different species can work together to protect the principles that make civilization possible. Admiral Voss joined the communication link. What happens next? Are we formally members of the Conclave now? The formal ceremonies will follow traditional procedures, the Kethvar replied. But effectively, humanity is now a full member of the Conclave of Cooperative Civilizations. You will have access to all our technologies, all our knowledge, and all our resources. But you will also share in the responsibility of protecting other species that choose cooperation over conquest. Sarah looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A single act of kindness on a mining moon had somehow created a bridge between civilizations. The child who had asked for help saving her parents had grown into a woman who helped save the principle of cooperation among the stars. But she also understood that this was just the beginning. The Dominion Alliance was still out there, still expanding through conquest and intimidation. Humanity had proven itself worthy of joining the fight for cooperative civilization, but that fight was far from over. The real test would be whether humans could maintain their principles while engaging in the kind of conflict that would determine the future of the galaxy. The war for galactic civilization was just beginning, and humanity had chosen its side. 5 years had passed since humanity joined the Conclave, and the war against the Dominion Alliance had evolved into something that no strategist on either side had anticipated. What began as a conflict between cooperative and aggressive civilizations had transformed into a fundamental test of which approach to galactic expansion could survive in the long term. Dr. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the UTS Unity, flagship of the largest joint fleet ever assembled by the Conclave. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see nearly 800 ships representing 23 different species, all preparing for what military analysts believed would be the decisive battle of the war. The Unity itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a human-designed hull enhanced with HFY biotechnology, crystalline computing systems, and propulsion that utilized principles that human physics was still learning to understand. The target was the Hegemony Home System, where the Dominion Alliance had concentrated their forces for what they believed would be their final push against Conclave space. Intelligence gathered over months of careful reconnaissance suggested that the Dominion was preparing to deploy a weapon that could destroy entire star systems, turning inhabited worlds into lifeless rocks in a matter of hours. If successful, they would have the power to hold all galactic civilization hostage. "Sarah, you need to see this," called Admiral Patricia Voss from the command center. Now bearing the rank of Fleet Admiral and serving as overall commander of Conclave forces, Voss had become one of the most respected military leaders in the Alliance. Her tactical innovations, combining human flexibility with alien technologies, had won 17 major engagements against Dominion forces. The intelligence report that Admiral Voss displayed contained information that changed everything. Deep space reconnaissance had detected massive construction projects in the outer system of the Hegemony homeworld. The Dominion wasn't just building a system destroyer weapon. They were constructing a mobile platform that could carry it between star systems. If completed, the weapon could systematically eliminate every world that supported cooperative civilization. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked, studying the construction timelines estimated by Conclave analysts. 6 weeks, maybe 8 if we're lucky," Admiral Voss replied. "After that, they'll have a weapon that makes our entire fleet irrelevant. We either stop them now, or we surrender the galaxy to conquest-based expansion." The strategic implications were staggering. The Conclave had grown during the war, with dozens of previously neutral species choosing cooperation over the isolation that made them vulnerable to Dominion aggression. But that growth would mean nothing if the Alliance could threaten entire civilizations with extinction. Sarah found herself thinking about the path that had led to this moment. The scared 8-year-old who had asked an alien for help saving her parents had somehow become the diplomatic architect of the largest military alliance in galactic history. Every choice made since that night on New Perth had built toward this confrontation between two fundamentally different approaches to existence among the stars. The Kethvar collective consciousness reached out to her as she contemplated the approaching battle. Sarah Chun, the moment of greatest testing approaches. The small human who showed courage in asking for aid has become the bridge between species facing their ultimate challenge. The outcome of this engagement will determine whether cooperation or conquest shapes the future of galactic civilization. "I know," Sarah replied, through the consciousness-to-consciousness link that had become as natural as speech after years of practice. "But I keep thinking about all the species we've lost to Dominion aggression. The price of this war has been enormous. The price of surrender would be greater," the Kethvar reminded her. 18 species have been conquered or destroyed since the Dominion Alliance formed. Their knowledge, their cultures, their unique contributions to galactic consciousness, all eliminated to serve the expansion of aggressive civilizations. This cannot continue. The battle plan that emerged from 3 weeks of intensive planning represented the most complex military operation ever attempted. The assault on the Hegemony home system would require coordinated attacks across multiple levels of reality, utilizing capabilities that some species possessed while others could only theoretically understand. Human ships would lead the primary assault fleet, using their gravity manipulation technology to create tactical advantages that no Dominion forces had ever encountered. Crystalline vessels would provide electronic warfare support, overwhelming enemy sensors with false information while protecting Allied communications. Particle cloud ships would conduct stealth operations, infiltrating Dominion defensive positions through dimensions that their technology couldn't monitor. But the most crucial element of the plan involved the energy beings that existed partially outside normal spacetime. These entities could potentially disable the system destroyer weapon by interfering with the fundamental forces that powered it. However, such intervention required enormous sacrifice. The energy beings would have to merge permanently with the weapon's power core, ending their existence as independent consciousness while preventing galactic catastrophe. Sarah participated in the final planning sessions aboard ships that challenged human understanding of physics. The crystalline command vessel existed as a living geometric structure that grew new rooms and passages as needed. The particle cloud communication center felt more like swimming through thick liquid than walking through air. Most alien of all was the energy being coordination node, a space that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and required special equipment for biological life forms to survive. The question before us: explain the energy being representative through harmonic patterns that translated as mathematics, is whether individual sacrifice for collective survival represents the highest form of cooperation, or whether survival requires preservation of all member consciousness. The philosophical implications went to the heart of what the conclave represented. These beings were willing to sacrifice themselves to prevent the destruction of cooperative civilization, but accepting that sacrifice would change the fundamental nature of the alliance they were fighting to preserve. Sarah found herself in the impossible position of helping to decide whether an entire species should sacrifice itself for the greater good. Is there no other way to disable the weapon? Physical destruction requires close approach that would expose our fleets to system-wide annihilation, the HFY explained. The energy being's intervention represents our only certainty of success, but it requires their complete merger with alien technology. They would cease to exist as independent entities. The energy beings had already reached consensus among themselves. They were prepared to make the sacrifice if it meant preserving cooperative civilization for other species. But they wanted the decision to come from the conclave as a whole, demonstrating that such choices were made through collective wisdom rather than individual heroism. Admiral Voss cast the deciding vote. We accept your sacrifice with honor and gratitude. The conclave will ensure that your contribution to galactic civilization is remembered, and that the principles you died for continue to guide our expansion among the stars. The final approach to the hegemony home system took place across multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Human sensors could track the conventional ships moving through normal space, but they could only approximate the movements of vessels that existed partially outside standard physics. The coordination required constant communication between species that experience time and space in fundamentally different ways. Sarah monitored the operation from the Unity's command center, serving as the primary liaison between human tactical systems and alien command structures. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, not just for the success of the mission, but for the survival of cooperative principles in a galaxy that seemed increasingly drawn toward conquest and domination. The Dominion fleet that defended their home system represented the combined military might of 7 aggressive species. Over 1,200 warships arranged in defensive formations that utilized their best understanding of conclave capabilities. But they had never faced a truly coordinated assault from species that could combine their unique abilities into tactics that transcended individual technological limitations. The battle began with crystalline ships creating massive sensor shadows that hid the true disposition of conclave forces. Particle cloud vessels penetrated Dominion defensive screens by existing partially outside the dimensions that conventional weapons could target. Energy beings disrupted power flow between Dominion ships by interfering with the fundamental forces that connected their fleet networks. Human ships provided the tactical backbone that allowed these exotic capabilities to be used effectively. Admiral Voss coordinated fleet movements that seemed impossible to outside observers, maintaining formation integrity across multiple dimensions while adapting to Dominion countermeasures in real time. But the crucial moment came when the energy beings began their final approach to the system destroyer weapon. Sarah watched through sensors that barely comprehended what was happening as these entities prepared to sacrifice their individual existence for collective survival. The weapon itself was a construct that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality, drawing power from the fundamental forces that held matter together. The energy being's merger with the weapon created a cascade effect that propagated throughout the hegemony system. Instead of destroying stars, the system destroyer began converting its accumulated energy into forms that enhanced rather than eliminated stellar processes. Planets that had been stripped bare by Dominion resource extraction began showing signs of ecological recovery. Moons that had been shattered for raw materials started reforming into stable structures. The effect on Dominion morale was immediate and devastating. Their ultimate weapon had been turned into a tool of creation rather than destruction, demonstrating that cooperative civilizations could transform conquest into restoration. Species that had been forced into the Dominion Alliance through fear and intimidation began switching sides as they realized that the Conclave offered protection and recovery rather than just resistance. The battle for the hegemony home system became the last major engagement of the war. Within 6 months, the Dominion Alliance had collapsed as member species either joined the Conclave or withdrew into isolation. The hegemony of Tsar themselves chose exile to the Galactic Rim, preferring separation to the changes that cooperation would require. As Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Unity, watching the restoration of a world that had been devastated by aggressive expansion, she thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. A single act of kindness by an alien being toward a scared human child had somehow led to the transformation of galactic civilization. The Kethvar collective consciousness reached out to her one final time as the Conclave fleet prepared to return to their respective home systems. Sarah Chun, the small human who demonstrated courage, has become the architect of galactic cooperation. But more than that, you have shown that individual acts of compassion can reshape the fundamental nature of civilization among the stars. What happens now? Sarah asked, watching ships from 23 different species beginning their journeys home. The war is over, but the challenges of maintaining cooperation will continue. Now we build the civilization that the energy beings died to preserve, the Kethvar replied. We explore, we learn, we grow, and we help other species make the choice between cooperation and conquest. The galaxy is vast, and there will always be new civilizations discovering the stars. Our role is to ensure that they find examples of cooperation rather than models of domination. Sarah nodded, understanding that her role as a bridge between species was far from over. Humanity had proven itself worthy of membership in galactic civilization, but that membership came with ongoing responsibilities to help other species make the same choice between cooperation and conquest that had defined this war. Admiral Voss joined her at the viewport, looking out at the restored world below them. It's hard to believe that all of this started with a little girl asking an alien to help save her parents. Maybe that's the most important lesson, Sarah replied. The biggest changes in the universe often start with the smallest acts of courage and compassion. The child who asked for help grew up to help save galactic civilization, but she never forgot that the real power comes from caring about others and being brave enough to ask for help when you need it. As the Unity began its journey back to human space, Sarah thought about all the species that would follow humanity's path from first contact to galactic citizenship. The Conclave would be there to guide them, offering the same choice that the Kethvar had offered to humanity: cooperation or isolation, growth through understanding rather than conquest through force. The little girl who had once pressed her face against a viewport on a mining moon, watching strange lights dance across an alien sky, had helped create a future where other children would look up at the stars and see not threats or emptiness, but endless possibilities for connection and discovery. The galaxy had chosen cooperation over conquest, and that choice would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. In the depths of space, new civilizations were just beginning to develop the technologies that would carry them to the stars. When they finally reached out beyond their home worlds, they would find a galaxy where cooperation was stronger than conquest, where different species worked together to explore and preserve rather than exploit and destroy. They would find the legacy of a scared little girl who asked an alien for help, and in doing so, change the fundamental nature of civilization among the stars.